Connect, I kind of took the opportunity through teaching American constitutional law. We can also see what Paul is going through in that way. I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. It is fascinating to follow the journey of the Apostle Paul after his arrest in Acts 21, particularly when we consider how such a legal battle would play out in our own court system. Paul invoked his right as a Roman citizen to appeal to Caesar and was sent to Rome so his case would be heard by the emperor himself. I believe it was Nero at the time. This would be like taking a case all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. But in the United States judicial system, Paul's case would have been thrown out long before reaching the Supreme Court because he would have been found to be exercising his First Amendment right to freedom of speech and freedom of religion. They didn't have amendments at the time. They still had some rights, but we'll explore what those are. Let's take a walk from Paul's arrest to the end of the book of Acts to see some of the injustices he suffered that would conflict with today's U.S. judicial system. They would not only conflict with today's U.S. judicial system, but they would also influence today's judicial system. First example, Paul is arrested without probable cause in chapter 21, verse 33. This would be a violation of the Fourth Amendment. If they arrest him, they don't really have a reason to arrest him. He hasn't really done anything illegal according to Roman law. Next, Paul is almost whipped in chapter 22, verse 25, which is a violation of the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And not only that, that would also be a violation of the Sixth Amendment because he hasn't even had a trial yet, let alone a sentencing that would, cause him to be whipped or to be sentenced to being whipped for that matter. The high council with the high priest in chapter 23, verse 3, when he told all the people around Paul to slap him, he's saying, that's another thing. He's also being, submitted to cruel and unusual punishment, even though he hasn't really done anything illegal in the eyes of the Romans. The next example, Governor Felix hopes Paul will bribe him, chapter 24, verse 26. Perhaps a violation of the Eighth Amendment, which also prohibits excessive bail and fines. Also for the Sixth Amendment, he's taken from Jerusalem to Caesarea for his hearings, which is he's being taken out of the jurisdiction in which he committed the alleged crime, which is also what we would see as a Sixth Amendment violation today. Paul is imprisoned for 2 years without being charged, chapter 24, verse 27. This is a violation of the Sixth Amendment, which assures a right to a speedy trial. Now, it might take 2 years to get a trial going these days, but there's a long period of preparation for a trial if that happens these days. And Paul stands before Governor Festus for a second hearing and King Agrippa for a third hearing in chapters 25 and 26. We'll see this one here in 26. This would be a violation of the Fifth Amendment, which prohibits a person being tried twice for the same offense, as Roman hearings were akin to a trial. And finally, Paul is imprisoned in Rome for 2 more years without being charged in chapter 28. Again, violating the Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial. Now, these are all the events that have happened coming up to this final hearing, or at least the final hearing that's recorded. And then a new sheriff comes to town, Governor Festus, who is the nephew of Agrippa II, by the way. King Herod Agrippa II. He's going to be governor there in Caesarea, and he wastes no time. He's got Paul in a hearing within a couple of days. I'll give you Festus's account to his uncle, Herod Agrippa II. In chapter 25, verses 15 and 16, he says, "When I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and Jewish elders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him to death, presumably. I pointed out to them that Roman law does not convict people without a trial." That's the Sixth Amendment. "They must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers," also Sixth Amendment, "and defend themselves," also Sixth Amendment. Romans had a lot of respect for justice because they had a love for Greek culture, which was which we give them credit for the infancy of democracy. And Rome would get the most credit for spreading it out. By the way, these rules of hearings and trials and whatnot, go back to Leviticus, go back to Deuteronomy. Same situation. You have the right to defend yourself. And whoever accuses you, if you are found to be guilty, whoever accused you has to throw the first stone, right? We do believe from extra biblical sources that he did get a hearing in front of Nero once he did get to Rome, but he had to wait around for a couple more years for that to happen. And of course, he was preaching the name of Jesus the Christ the entire time.